In 1603, Okuni invented kabuki theater with an outdoor show where everyone was in drag. She dressed as a samurai with a giant sword hanging to her side. A Confucian scholar of the time described the event. The men wear women's clothing, the women wear men's clothing, they sing bass songs and dance vulgar dances. Their lewd voices are clamorous like the buzzing of flies and crying of cicadas. For the name of her troupe, Okuni chose kabuki, meaning off-kilter. Perhaps a kind of synonym for queer. Later, kabuki theater became institutionalized and women were restricted from stages, leaving only the onagata, or femme drag roles. But in 1913, the Takarazuka Railway Company Review honored Okuni with the first ever lavish musical production starring all women, including many boy roles. This tradition continues today over 100 years later, the longest running drag king troupe of all time. In Wales, during the 1830s and 40s, hundreds of tenant farmers dressed up in drag called each other Rebecca and rebelled against expanding empire by destroying British toll gates. For their costumes, the farmers braided horsehair wigs, painted paper masks, and wore bonnets, shawls, and petticoats draping to the ground. Throughout medieval Europe, topsy-turvy drag was frequent during times of carnival, and often led to social upheaval. There was the French Mère Folle of 1576, a community-appointed drag queen for the festivities who publicly exposed the king's Grand Master of the Forest for abusing his wife and neglecting the land. Or the bands of so-called white boys in Ireland of the 1760s who called themselves fairies and wore long linen dresses with a mission to restore ancient commons by seizing property from landlords and destroying fences around empty land. William Dorsey Swann called herself the Queen of Drag in 1890s Washington, D.C., and was known for throwing balls for her friends and community to dress up and dance in silk and satin gowns. Drag or fairy parties were very common in cities throughout the 1800s. The first drag ball in Harlem was advertised in the 1860s, founded by formerly enslaved queer trailblazers like William Dorsey Swann. Often these celebrations and spaces were targeted by police raids. William was the first American on record to pursue legal and political action to defend the LGBTQ community's right to gather against the police by requesting a pardon from President Cleveland, a request that was denied. In 2019, writer Channing Joseph shared the first research about William Dorsey Swann, and the word spread about America's first drag queen. Queer history is ever evolving, and new discoveries are made every day about who we are and where we come from. In 1904, at the age of 11, Lanfang debuted as a Don, the drag heroine of Chinese kunchu opera. She sang in a high-pitched voice, posed with immaculate expressions, and performed stunts, including acting drunk and catching a full glass of wine on her foot. Lanfang toured worldwide in the 1930s and was heralded for her technical precision, raw emotion, and fantasy costuming. She was known to maintain femme gender presentation offstage with long hair, nails, and makeup. At the end of her career, Lanfang supported the rightful reintroduction of women to Chinese stages and became an instructor for early film actresses. To this day, she is considered one of, if not the most important actor in all of Chinese theatrical history, and beloved precisely for her drag. Amateur tightrope walker Van der Clyde left his mother's house at age 14 and joined the traveling circus in drag. A few years later, he performed his first solo aerial act in 1919, debuting as the mysterious Barbette. By 1923, Barbette was touring stages throughout Europe, delighting them with her stunts and her giant ostrich feather ensembles. Barbette's act hinged on striptease, ending with a wig reveal that made it clear she was really a he, putting an elevated twist on the vaudeville-era impersonator reveal. Unfortunately, Barbette's stage career was cut short by an injury, although later in life she worked as a drag expert for films like Some Like It Hot. The writer Jean Cocteau wrote, "He pleases those who see the woman in him, those who divine the man in him, and others whose soul is stirred by the supernatural sex of beauty." An original non-binary pop sensation. before the age of 20, Josephine Baker had run away from home, moved to New York City to dance in the vaudeville circuit, and worked on Broadway as a chorus dancer. Living in Harlem during the 20s, she was exposed to a thriving queer scene, including the famous Rockland Palace drag balls. In 1925, she joined a Parisian troupe where her African fantasy burlesque performances became an overnight sensation. She primarily performed in femme drag, but was also known for her male impersonation. She was actively political, working as a spy for France to take down the Nazis, and later speaking out against racism in the US at the 1963 March on Washington. Josephine Baker famously adored drag queens and was a frequent guest at Finocchio's and at the Jewel Box Revue. She even formed a friendship with drag queen Lynn Carter, who impersonated her, and Josephine gave her several gowns to wear, a gift from one drag icon to another. Within her own lifetime, Coccinelle became a worldwide trans drag superstar who was idolized by her fellow queens. She was one of the first figures after Christine Jorgensen to publicly undergo gender affirmation surgery and was granted official status as a woman in France in 1962, where she even was legally married. Born in Paris, Coccinelle's mother worked as a flower seller at Madame Arthur's, a famous drag club. Later, Coccinelle herself became an acclaimed drag performer and was celebrated for her beauty. She was a frequent model and cover star in self-published cross-dresser magazines of the 50s and 60s that circulated around the world. Later in life, she founded organizations advocating for trans rights and relocated to Berlin, where she continued to perform in drag for many years. When the San Francisco police began to regularly shut down José Sarria's beloved Black Cat Cafe in early 1960s raids, the Queen fought back. Sarria performed camp operas there under the name The Nightingale of Montgomery Street. Born to a single mother, a refugee from Colombia, José became economically and politically aware at a young age. In 1960, she founded a union of bar workers. In 61, she became the first out gay person to run for political office in the country. She lost, but paved the way for others. When San Francisco held its first public drag pageant, she won and declared herself not merely the queen, but the empress. In 1965, she founded her own drag pageant, the Imperial Court System, which to this day continues to raise thousands of dollars for charity each year. Life magazine called her the most notorious homosexual, and she wore those words with pride for the rest of her life, along with her signature royal tiara. People magazine once called Divine the most important drag queen of the century, but all she wanted to do was get out of drag. A self-proclaimed spoiled brat turned hairstylist, Divine was given her name by friend and filmmaker John Waters, who called her the most beautiful woman in the world. Almost. In 1972, their film Pink Flamingos became a cult classic and skyrocketed Divine to countercultural fame. Off her film success, she launched a disco and nightlife career, touring gay destinations, particularly London, where she became known for outlandish stunts on stage, such as rising up on a hydraulic lift, singing on the roof of a boat, and riding a baby elephant. Divine served as an inspiration for many, from the character design for Ursula the Sea Witch to the ethos of the punk drag superstars who came after. Give it up for Divine.